Hello guys, and welcome back for another video. So today I'm doing a really highly requested one, which is going through all my GCSE art stuff. I haven't been able to collect it all back. Some I left intentionally and some I couldn't find. When we had our GCSE art display, this was what my section of the classroom looked like. The only thing I left at school intentionally was the girl, the big purple girl in the forest. I wanted to incorporate something 3D into all my pieces because I had a wall hanging, I had a canvas, I had a painting and all that, but I didn't have something 3D that would stand out. So I thought I would paper mache my sister's hands and then bring her hands out of the photo so that she was holding a jar which would have a light in it. Not only do we not have enough space in our house, but it was kind of creepy, so I just left it there. The other thing was my environment canvas. That was my year 10 10-hour piece, so I did it over 2 days in exam conditions. That was loads of paintings of all different styles, so I did quite a minimalist one of my front door because it was bold and red. I had a few mishaps on the way where I tried to paint a doorbell, but it went really wrong, so I swapped it in for some wind chimes. The thing I liked about that was that I added in a 3D aspect where I used stones from my actual garden and I put it down the middle. So as you can see, this is my final art book. So this started all the way from the start of GCSE. I really hated this page so much. I'm just going to skip past it. Then everybody had to do a page on natural forms. I used charcoal and rubber and I did some experimental markings. And then I did it with pencil, using a 4B pencil. Then we had to do some observational studies of shells. Living in Brighton, there are plenty of shells to draw. I mean, if you want to pause the video and read all my handwriting and stuff, basically I just say I used white chalk and some colour pastels. I then did an extra pencil drawing of a shell. We then had to copy the style of this guy. I can't remember his name, but he liked to draw these kind of robust figs. That was his kind of style. After apples and figs, we moved on to peppers. And for this I did watercolour. Basically I drew it with a pen, a biro, and then I photocopied it, lightened it down so that I could paint over it and reuse it again. The cut in half peppers come from this one, which I really hate. I think it looks kind of gross. Then I did some plant portraits. So this was a photograph and this was my version of it. This was the photograph and this is my version of it. The photos were taken by Carl Blossfeldt. Then we had to do abstract peppers. So this is really bright, bold, colourful. I used my bio drawings again, but I did it with colours from the opposite side of the colour spectrum so that it created a lot of contrast. This was using pencil, this was using oil pastel, which was really hard to get detail with, but I liked the vibrant colours. Some more watercolour of a close-up, and then this took forever. Basically, I hole punched white, pink and purple and some blue paper. I ripped up some newspaper and used that as the background. It's quite eye-catching, but I would never want to do it again. After that, we had to paint more shells, but this time it was timed. So this was 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minute, 6 minute, and then in 7 minutes, by the time that you've done it like 7 times, you're a lot quicker and you kind of know how to do shadows and more detail and stuff. Then we had to study an artist who had painted these water pipes. That was quite interesting. It took quite a while. I used a lot of rulers though to get the straight lines, so that was a bit of a cheat, but yeah, that was fun. A mini pair of pliers. This is the guy. His name is Jim Dine. As you can tell, he likes his hearts, so I thought I would fill his page with heart paper. This small photo here of that spanner thing, I then recreated over here. Then we had to do construction lines, so I did open scissors and closed scissors. I tried to make it artsy by ripping the page with the scissors, but I mean, it doesn't really add much, so I probably wouldn't do that again. So I did a huge, I think it was maybe A1 version of this in chalk pastel. I was really proud of it. It took me forever because I was finding the dimensions of the keys quite hard. Also, to create the booker of the white line in the background was really hard, but I've recently found out if you use salt you can create quite a nice booker style. But basically these are the drawings of the rusty materials. Then this was probably one of my favourite pages in here. We all had to do a page on Georgia O'Keeffe, who's an American artist. I decided to paint her iris. If you watch my 10 books to read before you die video, I spoke about double loading your paintbrush and that kind of skill. If you want to know more about that, then I'll link that video below. But basically it kind of explained how I use these kind of two tones with the blues, the whites and the yellows, but without making them into a gross brown kind of colour. It creates a lot more detail, and we naturally do it when we do our backgrounds. So as you can see here, you have like darker streaks in between the lighter streaks. It creates more realistic pictures. Then we had to do natural forms. I took this photo and I reproduced it in oil pastel. I did this grape and I did it in chalk pastel, and I then did this in A3, which I'll show you in a second. That was the hardest to carry home because I had chalk pastel all over my black jeans. One whole grape is bigger than my hand. No. Off. Then I filled this page with raspberries because they're sweet, cute, and quite nice to paint. They're quite simple because they're basically just circles, and then you do a little bit of shading with the wire on it. Then our art class took a trip to Tate Modern. I have to admit the stuff at Tate Modern isn't really my favourite, but what I did is I took some photos of it, so that I could finish it in my free time, but also so that I could compare the real version to my version. Then I did a little bit of further reading, and I copied some of the information that they had next to the artwork just to make it more interactive. This one was probably the best one, not just because it's like a plate of food, because I got to use some paper that you can see in this photo. This is the real photo. Then they had a Louise Bourgeois section, which was actually quite nice. I found her stuff quite interesting. She did quite a simple drawing of a guy in a bath, but the bath had been turned around. Down here basically spoke about how she used ink to create contrast of the water to the plain white background. Then a lot of people in my art class chose this one to study and to draw, I suppose because it's quite interesting with all the circles and stuff. You can get a lot of shadow into it. Then we had to do a page of colour definitions. So I used oil pastel to create the different shades. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure I blended it in with my finger. These were all the colours that I used. They've got a bit squished over time. Then I did a whole page on Camille Pissarro. I spoke about the subject matter, the painting techniques, the composition, and my opinion on it. Basically, our teacher gave us loads of artwork, and I just picked this one because I thought it was the prettiest. Then we had to do a page on Impressionists and how they create mood and atmosphere. Something I did like is creating the background with the watercolour wash using like greens as well as blues. Then my favourite guy is Paul Signac. I liked Paul Signac because he inspired Henri Matisse, and he reminded me a little bit of Monet in like his dotted style. But I really liked his sunset and his boat photos and how his style had evolved over time. This sunset photo here I then reproduced in acrylic. I found it really hard to create the water ripples to make it look realistic, but I really enjoyed that one. This is even more Paul Signac, so I'll flip the screen around. Basically, to create his dots, I tried a different style where I actually painted but on bubble wrap, and it was the hardest thing because only halfway through I realised if I want detail in this I need to do the detail first because I'm then flipping it around. So I had to somehow get my proportions correct and like scratch off parts to then create some detail. Also on bubble wrap, it didn't dry quick, but it wouldn't mix normally because it's quite plasticky, of course, so I found that really hard, but it was really nice to like try something completely different. Then I took some of his mono print workings, so I used this photo and I created this using you know, where you do the roller of the ink and then you colour it in kind of thing. Then for my final piece we had to come up with some of our initial ideas, and I turned ideas into Signac because he was the artist study that I was going to do. So some of the ideas that I came up with was a mobile using like origami boats and flowers because, as you can tell, he's a big fan of boats. Then I thought I could do maybe a triptych, which is 3 photos together, quite into poppy fields and fields of flowers, so I thought I could do something quite impressionist with that using this kind of photo. I was quite excited to maybe try out a screen, but I never did that, also because we had to find the materials ourselves and I didn't really know where I could get a screen to then paint. But my top 3 ideas, this was the one I actually ended up doing, which was my wall hanging. Either that or I would have done a textile piece, which I showed here. I wanted to do a boat neck cut because he likes his boats again. What I was quite excited to do was to use this blue netting over the silk and then create some origami boats to then put on the trail of the dress, but I don't think that really would have worked. I definitely would have required more time than 10 hours for that. My third favourite idea was this boat. So I saw some photos of these reeds. I didn't really know how I would do it, but I would have loved to try it out because of course boats were his passion and he wanted to be an architect. This is a photo of my final piece that I did. So I painted some boats using dots, which was really hard, but I basically started off using a sponge to create the background, and then I went in with smaller, finer details. The golden age has not passed, it lies in the future. The anarchist painter is not the one who will create anarchist pictures, but the one who will fight all his individuality against official conventions. They were my two favourite quotes of his. So as you come up these stairs, you are greeted by this. These dots were all created either by the back of a paintbrush or small little nibs. I used the big dots at the bottom to make them seem like nearer to you, and then smaller red dots halfway through the painting, so it's like it gets further away from you. Then I had to do some cardboard studies. This was a little tassel I think I got off my cushion, don't tell my mum. This was some textile materials I had to do, so we had to do weaving but with different like papers and different stuff. It was again meh, I did not like it that much. Unfortunately my book had to finish on that because that was the end of our class work that we did, so then I had to work towards my final pieces that I would do. We got given the title Together and Apart, and I had to create 2 boards for this. So this is my first board that I did for my Together and or Apart. I was quite proud of my mind map because I used like black and white for the shadows and the titles, and it was neat. I then did a watercolour of some jars. I quite like that picture. And then I did some chalk pastels on some shells again because I'd had a lot of practice with drawing shells. Got given these small little checkerboards, and you had to do some like glue paper ones, some acrylic ones, and then some string ones, and basically this is to show Together and Apart. I didn't want to just do natural forms with shells and flowers, but I wanted to do like the human body because, like I say on my big final piece board, I'd never actually painted a person before, let alone like made a 3D person, and in 10 hours. Watercolour fingers and oil pastel fingers. I found loads of artists that I like. One of them was Chorilla Karina, who really liked using like fairies, galaxies and that kind of stuff. So I used chalk pastel to create her spiraling galaxy. So on my second board I did even more drawings of hands because I wanted, as I say here, to improve my hand drawing, to try out different positions, because in the end this was the position that the girl over here had. So I wanted to like see if I could get the detail. But one of my favourite things that I did on this board was my George Delatour artist study. He did a lot of nighttime acrylic and oil pastel paintings of candles and stuff. So as you can see, all these people holding candles. I then tried to recreate that with the nighttime and, you know, holding a candle basically. Another artist that I really liked was Jean Valdal. You can't really read what I wrote about her, which I'm a bit annoyed about. I should have used black paper as my background, but I do like that I've used some of this pretty paper. I'm going to take this off afterwards and then reuse it. So this is my acrylic version of her artwork. Then up here we had some of my ideas. So I was going to do another wall hanging, but I didn't really want to do 2 wall hangings. But then I thought I could maybe do a dress. I was going to use glitter to create some sparkles and like a metallic belt, and maybe using silk, but I thought that could be quite hard. What I ended up doing was my 3D painting. I was going to do clay hands, but I ended up going with paper mache because clay probably would have broke. There is actually a light in the jar that the hands hold, so at night time the jar lights up. I even decorated the jar with this special glass paint. I used that paint also to create fireflies that were 3D, and so they were super gold and shiny and metallic. Or I could have done a mobile which would have been 3D. I would have used beads threaded together and then some broken glass to symbolise being alone and shattered. Maybe like a teardrop white glass at the bottom. The idea came from having like broken families and being dismantled and pulled apart. Something quite funny is that I actually did this painting of this girl maybe like 2 years prior to my exam. So I had experience with painting hair, but not like, as you can tell, her lips are terrible. Her hair isn't actually even that good. The shadows aren't that great. Then I took loads of contacts because you need to show that you've like taken your own photos and not just looked at other people's photos too. Then I decided to do a tonal drawing of one of these photos. All of the cool paper that I used in my titles like Modify, and it has flowers on it and sparkles and stuff, that all came from the pound shop.